leave the trousers or pants that I was wearing on the prosthetic legs, and sometimes at night, if there weren't, if I'd come back at night from a training session, and then I'd throw my clothing in the laundry, and then usually if I took a item of clothing off, then I'd leave it on top of my prosthetic legs, or at my prosthetic legs, that if I needed to get dressed, that I could put my clothes on at the same time. And if I wasn't at home, if I was out at the training track where I have to take my everyday prosthetic legs off to put my running prosthetics on, then I would leave my walking prosthetics with either my tracksuit pants or a training top, a tracksuit training top on my prosthetic legs, or I'd put my prosthetic legs back into my bag, my training bag.
Why do you not put it next to the prosthetic legs? Why onto it?
I don't know. They part of my body. I see them as an extension of my body. I don't necessarily want to leave them where people can see them or take them, or so I just leave them next to my bag, and I usually cover them. I don't know if it's maybe just I get shy about them or embarrassed about them when I don't have them on. And when they're part of me, it's different.
Mr. Pistorius, let's talk about alcohol and drug use or abuse. Do you drink?
I do drink, my lady.
Could you maybe expand on that? How often do you drink?
Usually between our athletic season starts, our pre-season training starts in November every year. So from November until the Christmas time, I don't usually drink at all, and then over Christmas to New Year's, I usually go away with friends and family, and then during that period I drink. And then from the beginning of January to September, I don't consume any alcohol. And then September and October, half of September and October is usually our off period, when I'm doing sponsorship commitments and traveling a lot and that sort of thing. And then I'll, if I'm on the plane, I'll have a drink, or if I'm with friends, I'll drink with them.
And if I may revert to the boating accident, any drinks on that day?
I had drunk on that day. We were only at the river for at the place where I met my family for about half an hour. I remember having one drink, and I wasn't intoxicated on that day, but I had been drinking.
Substance use or abuse?
I guess in the month or month and a half that I had to break, I would drink, and sometimes excessively.
I mean, would you use drugs?
No, sir. I know, my lady. When my mother passed away when I was 15, I smoked dagga with a friend, and besides on that occasion, I haven't consumed or taken, or I haven't taken any substances since then.
In your sport, has there ever been a finding against you on account of illegal substances?
No,
or prohibited substances?
I've never taken any sports enhancing drugs or anything that would give me an advantage over my competitors. I'm very meticulous over the supplements I take. I only take supplements that I know are safe. And as far as substances in sport, I don't take anything that's not prohibited in my sport.
Have you ever been, and I want you to think back over the span of your lifetime, being exposed to crime?
think everybody in South Africa has been exposed to crime at some point. I think when I grew up, we were exposed to crime, with house break-ins, with family members being assaulted and hijacked, and I mean, I can think of.
Could you give examples when you were young and when it was?
We had many house break-ins when I was growing up. We had one at my father's home in Johannesburg when we were on holiday. When we got back to the house, they'd ransacked the entire house, and they'd one of the intruders or burglars had cut his hand, I think, and he'd wiped the blood all over the wall, and they'd pulled the safe out of the house using a motor vehicle. They'd cut all the sofas open and all the mattresses open. We got back in the middle of the holiday, and basically the whole house had been, what wasn't taken was destroyed. And then living with my mother, we were broken into on several occasions, and they stole small items. We didn't have much, so they stole TV sets and VCRs and things like that. My father has been hijacked twice since I was a kid, and the last time was when I was in high school. My brother was in an attempted hijacking. Many members of my family have been victims of house break-ins and violent crime such as that. And
have you ever been a victim to crime?
Yes, I have. I've been.
Could you explain to the court?
My home had been broken into in 2005. Once when I was away representing South Africa at an event called the Paralympic World Cup in Manchester, I got a phone call from my next door neighbour to tell me that my house had been broken into, and I couldn't leave to come back to South Africa. So when I came back, I think it was about a week and a half later, I saw that my TV had been stolen and a laptop, and my car's roof had been cut with an object, with a knife or something. And then in that same home, one night there was somebody in my garden. I had a Jack Russell. They kicked the Jack Russell that it needed to go to the vet and get medical treatment. Then I've been followed home late at night. I've been shot at on the highway.
Could you well, let's start with the being followed home. One incident or more than one?
More than once.
Could you explain to the court, give some more detail?
In the very limited time that I am at home, maybe 3-4 months of the year, I travel excessively. I probably do about 30 to 50,000 Ks in those 4 months. And a lot of my business engagements and sponsorship commitments and charity commitments require me to travel late at night. Many media have been to my house over the years to do interviews. Many people know where I live. The one occasion I was driving back from an interview in Johannesburg, and a car came up behind me. It was going a lot faster than I was, and I changed lanes. It came past me, and it slowed down a couple of car lengths in front of me, and I just saw a muzzle flash. It was dark, and I saw the muzzle flash and could hear the bang coming from the vehicle, and it was just before Buerta turn off in Pretoria. So I swerved across 2-3 lanes, and I took the exit, and I went under the highway, and I looped back, and I went to the Rhapsodies, and I thought I'd get to where a lot of people are, and it was a weeknight, so I just went there and I sat there for a while. I don't recall who I phoned, but I phoned a friend to take my car, take me home, and I left my car there, picked it up the next day. And then with Miss Taylor, I was followed home one night. I saw in my rearview mirror that a car had been following me since Midrand, and there were 2 occupants in the vehicle. I phoned the security gate at the estate that I stayed at, and I told them that I was being followed. And when I got to the gate, there's a circle maybe 50 meters from the entrance of our estate. I sped up. I jumped out of the car and I distanced myself from the car, and I had my firearm by my side. I didn't draw it, but I had my hand on it, on my hip, and the 2 gentlemen in the car sped off. There have been other occasions where similar cars or the same looking car has followed me for a couple of days at a time, and I wasn't sure of who it was or what it was, but I phoned my agent and informed him. Those are the instances that I can remember.
Have you ever assisted someone that was a victim of crime?
I have.
A serious incident, not just a everyday incident.
I have. There was a woman at Menlyn Square last 2012 getting assaulted by 2 gentlemen early in the evening in the parking lot. They'd been drinking, and I was going to visit a friend. I was going to have a meal with a friend at Menlyn Square, and as I drove in, these 2 men were pulling the woman around, and I got out the car and I told them to back up and leave her, and I waited. There was a police patrolling car in the area, and a bystander called the policeman. And then in January 2013, about 2 kilometers from my home, I was coming back from a training session mid one morning, and I was parked at the robot, and a Toyota Corolla skipped the robot, and shortly afterwards a taxi skipped the robot. The taxi pushed the Corolla up on the pavement, and they started throwing bricks out of the window. I was parked at the robot at the time. I was a bit taken aback and didn't know what to do, and then 2 occupants and the driver got out the taxi, and they started smashing the windscreen and the driver's window of this taxi. They smashed the window and they dragged the guy out into the street. They started beating him with rocks in his face and in his head. At that point, I jumped the light. I hooted until I pulled up. I drew my firearm. I pointed it at the 3 people. They jumped in the taxi. They sped off. And this guy was just bleeding profusely. He was bleeding out of his head. He was bleeding out of everywhere. He was trying to stand up. He was falling over. He had a taxi association sign on his car, and I could see that there were papers all over the car. 2 of the wheels had burst on his car. But he was trying to stand up, and every time he stood up, he fell over. And every time he fell over, he was unable to put out his hands, so he was hitting his head on the tar again. So I didn't want to get blood. There was just blood everywhere, so I took him by the collar of his neck and by his pants, and I said to him, "Sir, you need to sit down. You're bleeding," and he wasn't following what I was saying. So I kind of picked him up, and I dragged him so that he couldn't walk to the curb, and I forced him to sit down. I called Netcare. I phoned the police. By this point, maybe 30 people had come up from the shopping centre, which is just down the road from my house, and they'd started helping. I went to my car and I got a training towel, and I gave it to the gentleman, and another guy had started helping. I think it was one of the waiters from the Spur restaurant, was starting to help this gentleman, and they were communicating in a native tongue. I don't know what language it was, and the situation seemed to be contained. So I left. I got in my car and I left. And then in December 2012, I was assaulted at a get-together after I'd received threats from a person. I'd been at a party, and a gentleman I didn't know came up to me, he introduced himself, and there was alcohol being consumed at the party, and he started telling me about this friend of his and how I should fear him and how my name was being mentioned in these circles. And I said to him, I didn't really want to entertain the conversation, and I thanked him for what he was putting across as a heads up. Later in the evening, I went to the bathroom, and I heard the same gentleman talking on the phone outside the other side of the house through the window, and I went around. I could hear he was on the phone, and it was obviously the same gentleman that he was warning me about earlier. And I went out the house and I asked if I could speak to this person, and after being verbally assaulted by them for longer than 10 minutes, I decided to just put down the phone and not entertain the conversation further. And shortly afterwards, I got hit in the head, and I ended up later that day receiving stitches and in the back of my head, and I had a black eye. And 2 days later, I reported the incident to the Hawks, South African division of the South African Police Service. They scheduled a meeting whereby I went and I sat down for this meeting. They brought the party in that was concerned, and they put it on record. I didn't want to get it into the media, and I didn't want to have a big thing out of it, because I presumed that this is what these people were trying to do, that they wanted me to engage with them in the media. I had calls from several journalists, which I just decided not to take, and I didn't give my side of the story across, and I left it at that.
The estate that you live in, the name is?
The estate that I resided in, my lady, is Silver Woods Estate.
As a matter of interest, since that the fateful day, have you ever been back to the estate?
I haven't been back, my lady.
And do you know of any crime in that estate?
In 2007, I decided to invest in property in Pretoria. I decided that I wanted to make it my base for training, and I'd been at high school in Pretoria, and I had a townhouse that I had, so I decided to build a home on the outskirts of Pretoria, and I chose that estate because it was further out of the city. It wasn't in the mix of everything. And when I built, there were 300 stands that were allocated inside the estate. There were maybe 27 at the time. I remember the number 27 that had been developed. So my house was one of the first homes. So over the course of from 2008, when I moved into 2013 to February 2013, there was always constant development going on in the estate, and there were at times crimes that were committed. I was aware that the building contractor that was working on my house in January, February last year, Mr. Menela, I was aware that he had been a victim of crime in our estate, whereby the only state security had used a ladder to gain access to the second floor of his home. And I was aware of a housekeeper being tied up. I think that was in 2012 during the day. One of the contractors came into the estate, and on the way they gained access through the security, through the gate. But during the day, on the way out, there was an open garage, and they went in and they tied the housekeeper up, and they stole items of interest. And then there were one or two housebreakings where we had increased the security of the estate. The homeowners association, they had used Coke bottles to put around the electric wiring of the electric fencing and to separate them. My brother lived next door to Silver Woods Estate at a nature conservation centre, and they'd often spoken about crime in the area, of shootouts in the area, and I was aware that there were a lot of crimes that were being committed. On the night of the 13th, I was speaking to my cousin on the phone. He was telling me he was driving up from Port Elizabeth, and he'd just got a new company car. He just purchased a VW Golf, a GTI Golf, and I was telling him that he shouldn't come up to Johannesburg because they're cars that get hijacked here extremely often. And the reason I knew this was because I'd been to the estate next door, which a friend of mine was developing. And he told me that one of the workers had come to him with a bag, and inside the bag they had found 34 different people that had been identified through driving licenses and ID books and wallets and things, and they'd found this bag of contents in one of the houses. And he told me that it was a syndicate which specialized in stealing GTI Golfs. And he was telling me the story of how the police had been there, but that the guy laughed at them when they arrived. He told them that they didn't know who he was, and the police basically left, and he'd continued to operate out of that same venue. He would, according to my friend, steal the cars and leave them there to see if anybody came to collect them, and then if they didn't, he would take the cars away. So I said to my cousin that he shouldn't come up to Pretoria, that he should rather fly up and I would rent him a vehicle or lease him or loan him a vehicle. So I was aware of the crime that we had in our area.
In that time, in February 2013, we know work was done at your house.
That's correct, my lady.
What was that all about?
My lady, in December 2012, I'd been to look at a property in Johannesburg. My relationship with Reva, I was kind of taken aback by her and just bowled over by how much I fell for her. So I thought about buying a house in Joburg, and I had been for some time. So I was looking at properties, and I went to look at a house in Johannesburg in December 2012. And I liked it, and I put in an offer to purchase the house, which was accepted. And I realized that I'd need to fix up certain things on my own home in Pretoria before I could sell it. There was some damp issues. The house needed to be repainted. There was small things like the broken window downstairs. There were some carpentry issues in the house. Just basic maintenance things that I hadn't been able to attend because I'd been overseas for most of the year. So I got a building contractor in January and February to work on the home. And there was a list of things that they needed to do. Some were maintenance, and then others were improvements on the house, which I thought would make it easier to sell.
When was this window broken?
I'm not too sure when the window was broken. I was throwing a cricket ball for my dog. We were playing in the garden, and I threw the ball, and I threw it askew, and it went through the corner of the window.
Do you know when this window would have been fixed?
It would have been fixed probably on the 14th or the 15th of February.
Why do you say that?
I'd given the building contractor a list of things to fix. He came with me to Builder's Warehouse to get some of the small items. As he was a friend, I don't think he was going to charge me, to do it, and I enjoy kind of DIY things. So we went to the Builder's Warehouse, and I bought a piece of glass. It was at the house. It was already wrapped in brown paper, and all that was needed was for them to fit it. So the glass was already at the house, and they were busy with maintenance every day.
Who was the person that was going to do that for you?
He was a friend of mine, a gentleman called Christo Menelo.
Does he also live in the estate?
He resides in the estate, my lady.
Do you know if he was subject to any crime in the estate?
He was the building contractor that I spoke of, that whilst he stayed in another home in the estate, his house was broken into by the security company which was doing the security in our estate. They gained access to the first floor of his home using a ladder. His partner was also a victim of crime. He was hijacked and he was hijacked in 2012 in Johannesburg, where they made him climb out of the car and walk up an old mine heap. And I remember he was quite devastated about that as well.
You spoke about your dogs. Can you tell the court about them?
I got my first dog when I bought my first townhouse in 2005. I had a little Jack Russell. 2 years later, I got a bull terrier. It was after the event that they tried to break into my home, and I decided I'd like a dog. I grew up with dogs, and I decided I wanted a dog that was maybe a better watchdog or a better guard dog. I got a bull terrier then, and then 3 years later I rescued an American pit bull. But they were very placid. They're loving dogs. They're quite calm. They, contrary to the names of the animals, my pit bull and bull terrier, I'd always leave around. If I had friends over, they would interact, and if they'd play with kids, they weren't at all aggressive.
You have in fact seen a video taken by the police of your house.
I saw a video taken by a police officer in my garden.
Did you see the reaction of the dogs?
Yes, the dogs were licking the police officer. They're not at all aggressive. The building contractors, who they didn't even know, were painting the house, and the dogs would often just walk around. They're not vicious dogs. They weren't trained to be attack dogs. They're very placid animals.
How did it come that you select that specific dog? I think the pit bull.
I selected them because I thought that they would make good watchdogs, good security dogs. Whilst I had the Jack Russell, they were better watchdogs because the Jack Russell was a light sleeper, and the two bigger dogs were not older, but the two bigger dogs, the bull terrier and the pit bull, they're slightly deeper sleepers. They're not the most alert dogs. But my Jack Russell passed away in 2011, and my bull terrier and my bull terrier and my pit bull were very placid. In the new house that I built, purchasing in Johannesburg, I'd spoken to the same building contractor, Mr. Menelo. He'd come out to the premises with me. At that property, the security would have been a lot better. I'd asked him to give me a quote on a guardhouse at the entrance of the home. The walls were a lot higher. The walls had electric fencing on, and the garden was a lot bigger. So there was always a possibility that I could have had another dog or got another dog in the future.
You also, in consultation, explained the selection process of the dog when you went to buy it.
Yeah, I went. The bull terrier I got imported from a very well-known South African breeder. He was basically a stud dog. He's extremely built, and I thought he'd make a fantastic guard dog. And although he is very protective over me, he follows me around the house, or he used to follow me around. He was very placid. If I stood in the shower, he'd stand in the shower. If I went to the car, he'd try to climb in the other door. He wasn't very aggressive. And in the pit bull, I drove through to a breeder who was advised. Somebody I knew had told me they were a reputable breeder, and I drove through to Secunda to go have a look at the dog. And when I got there, I realized that the breeder wasn't looking after the puppies. They were very terrified and scared. A friend of mine accompanied me on that trip, and I decided just to buy the dog anyway because it was evident that she had back problems. I think maybe she was abused. She was 3 months old, and she had a knob on her head, and from the time I got to her, she had to have a lot of medical attention. So she had ligament issues on her leg, and she needed to have the the blood on her head drained, and she wouldn't eat if you went near her, but after time she became a lovely dog, and she would run with me in the afternoons. If I got home from training and I was tired, then I'd just stand on a skateboard and she'd pull me on my skateboard. So she was very placid and not at all a dog that engaged, just kind of just she had like a temperament of a Labrador. She wasn't at all aggressive.
Mr. Pistorius, your religion, is that important to you?
Yeah, my religion's very important to me.
Tell the court about that.
My mother grew up in a Anglican, from an Anglican background. When I was born, we were in a Methodist church. My mother sang in the choir on Sundays at the church for many years. She also danced. She went to Israel on a tour when I was young, where she danced. It's like a religious kind of dancing with these long sheets of silk, and they used to go dance in the streets in Israel. And my mother told me that, we grew up just knowing that religion's God's, our refuge, and doesn't matter what may come of life, that you can always turn to the Lord. When my mum passed away, I struggled a bit with my faith, but I always knew that the Lord was part of my life. I think traveling was difficult for me as well. I didn't really get to attend church as often as I wanted to. Some countries we'd go to, we'd find churches which spoke a different language, and we just attend anyway, and most of the time people were extremely accommodating, and we found it an interesting cultural experience to do. And then 2011, 2012, my religion really started. I put a lot of faith in the Lord to get where I wanted to be. And then when I met Reva, I think it was just a blessing. I've always wanted to have a partner that was a Christian. She was a very strong Christian. She would pray for me at night, would pray about everything, pray about my training, pray about all the small things I had in my life. We'd pray before we eat. I think the religion's maybe what it definitely is. God's the thing that's got me through this last year. I mean, there have been times that I've just been just struggling a lot, and my God's my God of refuge. So
Pistorius, during the lunch adjournment, you spoke to me about how you feel and the exhaustion and so on. Can you remember that?
Yes, I think I'm tired. I'm just very tired at the moment. So,
did you sleep last night?
No, sir. I'm just tired. I think it's just it's a lot of things obviously going through my mind, and the weight of this is extremely overbearing. So I think it's just a lot to think about. And
Lady, I was actually requested to seek an early adjournment with the lunch adjournment, but I thought that it would be use up time to push him as far as I could, but he asked me that at some point
Yes.
If he could just, he's very exhausted. And I don't want to go to a new topic. It might not be fair in the circumstances. I'm sorry, I'm really keen to use up time, but not at the expense of other emotions.
No, it's understandable. Mr. Nell,
Milady?
would you object to an earlier
Well,
agenda?
Milady, I would like us to finalise the case. We have to get somewhere. But I've now heard what Mr. Pistorius said. I hope it's not a daily occurrence. But if it's not a daily occurrence and we can start moving this case forward, I have no objection.
Well, he does look exhausted. He does sound exhausted.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
I was just concerned about it, my lady. I'm in the hands of the court, but,
yes, no, I'll grant
but I in fact went on longer than I was requested to,
yes.
trying to make up time.
We'll adjourn until tomorrow at 9:30.
Daniel, right in front of